Good morning. I'm Savannah Sellers. Joe is off this morning, but we'll get a little Joe in the show as we just showed you later on. First, though, we begin with the latest out of the Middle East and a split-screen image of jubilation in Israel and devastation in Gaza. A weekend raid by Israeli forces rescued 4 hostages held by Hamas for more than 200 days. But that rescue may have come at a heavy cost for Palestinians. The Hamas-run health department claims hundreds were killed during that operation. This, as an NBC News has now learned, the Biden administration officials have discussed potentially negotiating its own deal with Hamas to secure the release of 5 Americans being held hostage in Gaza. We've got team coverage of the raid and all the fallout from the Middle East to Washington, but we begin with NBC News international correspondent Raf Sanchez near Tel Aviv. Raf,
hey there. Within an hour of those 4 hostages being rescued in the heart of central Gaza, they were flown by helicopter to this hospital here in Israel. 3 of the male hostages remain here for treatment, but doctors here say they are in generally good condition even after 8 months in captivity inside of Gaza. Now, an American official tells NBC News that U.S. intelligence helped Israel locate those hostages, setting the stage for that dramatic daytime rescue. The IDF says at 11 a.m. local time, special forces simultaneously stormed 2 apartments about 200 yards apart. 3 male hostages in one of those apartments, Noah Argamani in the other. The code word that the special forces gave out over the radio when they had the hostages in their own custody was, "We have the diamonds. We have the diamonds." But the hostages were not immediately safe. The IDF tells us that one of the vehicles carrying the 3 male hostages broke down amid an intense gunfight in central Gaza. Those hostages had to be transferred under fire into another vehicle before they could be taken by helicopter. Now, the most well-known of the hostages, Noah Argamani, that young woman whose screams were heard around the world as she was carried on the back of a motorcycle into Gaza. We first met her father, Yaakov, on October 8th. His world was crumbling after the kidnapping of his only child. We saw him here again this weekend, and he was beaming, as you can imagine. But while there are celebrations here in Israel, there is searing grief inside of Gaza. The health ministry there says at least 270 people were killed by Israeli fire during the course of that raid. They say at least 60 of them were children. Our team inside of Gaza seeing emergency rooms at hospitals just overrun with the dead and the dying. So it is clear that a large number of innocent people have lost their lives in the course of this raid. The IDF says Hamas deliberately holds hostages in crowded civilian areas. And while this rescue did unite Israel, politics is back once again. Last night, Benny Gantz, the centrist opposition leader, resigning from Benjamin Netanyahu's war cabinet, saying that the Israeli prime minister is playing politics with the war and calling for new elections. Netanyahu giving no indication that he will agree to those new elections. And the departure of the moderates from the Israeli government means that there are fewer centrists there to balance out the power of the far-right ministers who are deeply opposed to the ceasefire plan laid out by President Biden. Back to you.
Raf Sanchez, thank you so much. Well, for more now, we are joined by NBC News White House correspondent Monica Alba. Monica, good morning. I want to start with a developing story with you out of Washington this morning. I mentioned a moment ago the Biden administration discussing potentially negotiating a unilateral deal with Hamas to free American hostages. What can you tell us?
Well, this would be really significant if it happened, and there are a couple hypotheticals here. Now, these are internal discussions and deliberations within the Biden administration that essentially are saying if the overall talks right now that are taking place for a major ceasefire agreement that would include Israel, that would include these multiple phases that the president has laid out, if that were to fail, if ultimately Hamas rejects that proposal, then the U.S. has said that they would potentially then seek a unilateral deal with Hamas to secure the release of the remaining American hostages in Gaza. And it is believed that there could be 5 U.S. citizens who are still being held there. And we now know confirmed that an additional 3 American hostages were believed to have been killed on October 7th, but their bodies were taken into Gaza by Hamas. And of course, their families want to recover their remains. So that is what would be discussed if this happens. But we understand that these talks have not started yet. And if they were to take place, they would take place through a mediator, through Qatar, as we have seen these talks happen so far. But this really just shows you, Savannah, how delicate the current talks are, and the idea that they may not be able to be successful. So the U.S. believes, and something the president has pledged repeatedly, that he would do everything in his power to try to bring them home.
Monica, families of the hostages, of course, celebrating the return of their loved ones, as we just saw and heard Raf discussing. But a senior administration official said, actually, this rescue could potentially complicate efforts to broker a new ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas. We know that there was that devastation in the wake of this that was left behind in Gaza. But why is that, and what are you hearing from the White House?
Well, we know that Prime Minister Netanyahu has been really dug in on his position to continue with these military movements and advancements into Rafah and beyond inside of Gaza. So the fact that you have an operation like this that was able to rescue Israeli hostages means that they could potentially seek other similar operations. And so there is a sense here, at least from senior administration officials, that the Israeli prime minister could continue down that route. And then, of course, we're seeing the devastation there, the death of those Palestinians. So there's some thinking that the head of Hamas could potentially also then not have a lot of motive to want to accept the deal because of what we're seeing there. And so there is this larger question that things could just sort of continue at this impasse. And that is a major concern for the U.S., complicating the release of the remaining hostages. Savannah.
All right, Monica Alba, thank you very much. Let's now bring in Hagar Shamali. She's the host of Oh My World on YouTube and the former spokesperson for the U.S. mission to the UN and former NSC director for Syria and Lebanon. Hagar, always great to have you with us. Good morning. So first, what do you make of this potentially deal done directly between the U.S. and Hamas, as we were just discussing with Monica?
Well, it shows you a little bit the desperation the U.S. government is feeling at the moment. The U.S. has not been very publicly loud about fighting for the release of American hostages, to the detriment to a lot of American Jews feel really unsatisfied about that, dissatisfied about that. They're really upset about the fact that they don't hear the U.S. government loud about this issue. And so when they've gotten to the point now where they're saying, you know what, maybe we will go and negotiate a settlement ourselves because it's unilateral, because we could do it, because perhaps the U.S. government feels that the hostages are best released through a negotiation. That's the most successful way. Then it reflects that desperation. But I will say, while I hope for their release, and I think it's right for the U.S. government to pressure Hamas and to get their release and to prioritize this, I do worry what would be given in exchange to a terrorist group like Hamas.
Hagar, let's also talk about the resignation of Benny Gantz. This was big news over the weekend, resigning from the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's war cabinet. He is a centrist, a sort of moderating force. He is calling for elections in the fall to establish a new government to win back the trust of Israelis. Walk us through the significance of the resignation. Remind our viewers how they were even sort of formed together in this emergency government and on this war cabinet. And does it show that Netanyahu's domestic support is slipping, even when it comes right after what should have been very good news for him with the rescue of these 4 hostages?
Sure. Even with this jubilation, you have it doesn't really completely change how the Israeli public feels about Netanyahu and his leadership on this issue. From the beginning, a lot of Israelis have been saying, you know, we're going to support this effort through the war, but they really don't like him personally. A lot of them blame him in particular for Hamas's rise in strength, and that's because of these dirty politics he played to allow Hamas to be funded and gain strength so that Palestinians remain divided. And so that's his time has always been, the clock has always been ticking for Netanyahu. But Benny Gantz, when they created this war cabinet, was to push this centrist policy. And Benny Gantz is saying, you know what, I see Netanyahu trying to prolong this war for his own political gain, and I'm not here to stand for that. I've always thought elections were a matter of time, and I believe they'll happen at some point this year.
All right, Hagar Shamali, thank you very much. We always appreciate your analysis. Well, the federal criminal trial of President Biden's son, Hunter Biden, is heading into its final stretch this week. Prosecutors rested their case on Friday after calling 2 final witnesses. We could find out as soon as today if Hunter Biden himself will take the stand in his own defense. He's facing felony charges related to the 2018 purchase of a gun while using narcotics. Hunter Biden has pleaded not guilty. NBC News senior investigative producer Sarah Fitzpatrick joins us from outside the courthouse in Wilmington with more. Sarah, good morning. So court is back in session today after the jury was dismissed early for the weekend on Friday. Set the stage for us. What can we expect in court today from Hunter Biden's defense?
Good morning. Well, today is definitely the most consequential and the most high-stakes day of the trial. Within an hour, we'll learn if Hunter Biden will testify in his own defense. I'm told that over the weekend, the defense and prosecutors both prepared for that possibility quite intensely. But there's a lot riding on that. Hunter is not only facing this trial, but he's also facing a whole other separate trial from the same prosecution team later in the summer. So we're going to see if he decides to take the stand. If that doesn't happen, what we're told is that the defense will rest and we will move to closing arguments relatively quickly. Both teams have prepared about an hour of closing arguments for the jury, and then the jury could see the case as soon as this afternoon. So we're all, everyone is waiting to see what that decision is and what the consequence of it will be. If, in the closing argument, Hunter's attorneys will seek to introduce, and emphasize to the jury elements of doubt in the prosecution's case, specifically the lack of contemporaneous text messages on the date that Hunter Biden purchased the gun, as well as kind of some unusual elements that have been hinted at but not explicitly stated about the fact that the gun shop may have mishandled or inappropriately used the federal form that he filled out. It's going to be a very interesting day, Savannah.
Sarah, the jury heard from Hunter Biden's oldest daughter. She took the stand, in his defense. Walk us through her testimony that was emotional at times.
It was absolutely emotional, and it was incredibly uncomfortable to listen to at points. We saw the jury kind of moving in their chairs, at times appearing to kind of wipe away tears or look down, and even her own father wiped away tears during the testimony. It was a very kind of stilted and at times kind of, it seemed like she hadn't been fully prepared for what she was going to testify to. She did kind of focus on two key elements for the defense. One being that when she borrowed her father's car, which reportedly had the gun in the center console, that center console was locked the entire time that she had the vehicle in the period after she took possession of the car. And secondly, that she did not see any drug paraphernalia in the car when she picked it up at her aunt's house. But the prosecution was able to introduce some text messages, some contemporaneous text messages from the weekend, that Saturday night to Sunday morning period, in which it appears her father was texting her late at night. And Naomi appears to have referenced her father's struggles with addiction, saying to her father, quote, "I can't take this anymore, Dad." So that it seemed to work in the prosecution's favor to suggest that he may have been struggling with addiction at this time.
All right, Sarah, thank you very much for your reporting here. Well, sometime later today, former President Donald Trump will have a virtual pre-sentencing meeting with his probation officer after he was found guilty on all 34 counts of falsifying business records just over a week ago. NBC News exclusive reporting has revealed that Trump will take part in the interview with his probation officer from his home in Mar-a-Lago, with his lawyer Todd Blanche by his side. It's part of the lead up to Trump's sentencing on July 11th. NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalas is with us to explain this further. Danny, good morning. So there are a couple of things about this probation hearing that are unusual. So typically, these interviews are a way to get information on a defendant's social, criminal history. But of course, Trump is one of the country's most vetted public figures. So walk us through the purpose of his probation interview and also tell us why it's being held virtually.
Yeah, that's a great question, because the best way to understand this is to step back and think about a normal defendant, somebody no one's ever heard of. And what the PSR, the pre-sentence report, does is it's something prepared by probation, which is an arm of the court. It's not the prosecution. They sit down with the offender and they get a whole life story about the offender to create a total picture so the judge can take all of this into consideration at sentencing, because the judge needs to be educated about who is the person before me that is about to be sentenced. And especially in the federal system, the PSR is very important because it's something that will be used by the Bureau of Prisons going forward to actually help in classification. So the PSR is a really important document. Again, that's pre-sentence report, and it's prepared by probation. And this is something that normally you need to get a bio from the defendant, but who really needs a bio from Donald Trump? Normally, it also has to be in person. But of course, this is a former president, and the administrative headache of having him actually come in makes it so that you have to make special accommodations. It's not treating him special or better than anyone else. It's really more for the court and more for probation itself, because I can't imagine what a nightmare it would be in the hallways of that probation office for other probationers who are waiting for their meetings if a former president comes in flanked by press and Secret Service.
Danny, will this interview ultimately make a difference in the judge's sentencing decision? I mean, what's the likelihood that this impacts that? And then tell us also what your latest thinking is on if he actually would serve any jail time.
Yeah. Ordinarily, a defendant, it does make a difference what the probation report has, because it's stuff that wasn't known about that defendant before, their harsh upbringing, or maybe they came here from an impoverished country or something like that that might educate the judge. What judge in America doesn't know a lot about Donald Trump? What human in America doesn't already know a lot about the background of Donald Trump? So, yes, I mean, it's interesting, but it will read like a bio of Donald Trump, most of which we can get from Wikipedia or online, or depending on where you want to go for it. So what will Donald Trump get? I believe he should not get a sentence of incarceration. This is a lowest level felony in New York. Yes, there are 34 convictions, but it is the lowest level, really barely a felony in New York. No guns, no drugs, no violence, no prior convictions. And he's in his 70s, which is a factor that is considered because of the very tiny rate of recidivism, that's repeat offenders, in people in his age category. So all the factors favor him getting a probation only, or more specifically, a non-incarceration sentence. There are some factors that weigh in favor of incarceration. For example, most of them have to do with annoying the heck out of the judge throughout the trial.
Danny, the prosecution is expected to make its sentencing recommendation later this week. How does that factor in, and what happens after today's interview?
Boy, that is the biggest question for me, because it goes beyond a criminal justice question. It's a political question. If you're the DA's office, what is your sentencing recommendation? Do you declare victory? We won. We got the first ever conviction of a former president. So we're going to be happy with a sentence. We're not going to recommend an incarceration sentence. We're going to recommend probation. I don't think they're going to do that. I think they're going to keep pushing and go for a sentence of incarceration, realizing that they might lose. And that, of course, is its own political liability. A request for incarceration that's denied, by the way, happens all the time, but doesn't always happen with this many eyes on it.
Danny Savalos, as always, we appreciate you. Well, it is time to get a check of your weather with our Morning News Now forecast to get your week started. And we are delighted.
Ooh, delighted. That's good.
To have meteorologist Bill Cairns with us this morning. Bill, good morning. Great to see you.
Good morning. I moved up on the I miss you list. Delighted. It's pretty high. That's good. Hope everyone had a wonderful weekend. As we check the worst weather in the country this morning, grab the umbrella in the San Antonio area. It's going to pour here shortly. This line of thunderstorms is coming through on the west side right now on the 410 loop. And you can see it's got some pretty good strong rain with it. Also some lightning too. This will be in and out of the San Antonio area in about the next half hour to 45 minutes. We've also got some rain that's blowing through areas like Myrtle Beach to Wilmington, heading down towards beautiful Charleston. But all the focus this week is going to be on Florida. Florida, even by Florida standards, is going to get soaked. Now, there is a drought in place. It even is a severe drought. So we can absorb a lot of this, and some of the rain will be beneficial. But this is not good if you chose this week to be in Florida for any vacation plans, from the theme parks to the beaches. It's going to rain on and off all week long. Today, hit and miss. But then notice this mess. This is Tuesday, and then it's fast forward into Wednesday. Anywhere you see the bright reds, that's where we have some of the heaviest rains. And so as far as rainfall totals go, and this is almost like the amount of rain you'd get with a tropical storm or a hurricane, up to 10 inches of rain in areas. So that's going to be problematic, especially for urban flooding. The rest of the forecast, it is a gorgeous morning in the Great Lakes, Ohio Valley, also in the Northeast, and that will continue right through Tuesday. But get ready, sir. It is going to get a little toasty in areas of the Mid-Atlantic and the Northeast, expecting our first chance at 90s.
Wow.
From D.C. to Philly to New York City. It'd be brief, but at least one day of it. But obviously the story is going to be what happens in Florida this week.
Absolutely. When is summer official?
I believe it's the 21st, but I have to check
we
my
still have a
solstice
little
calendar.
ways. All right. Feels like summer, that's
It
for sure.
is. There's something called meteorological summer.
Yeah.
Which is June, July, August. We don't.
Yeah.
We go by. It's easier to keep track of the months.
There you go. Missed you.
Missed you too.
Good to see you.
Delighted to see you.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.